welcome to another episode of Boring History. My name is Angela and today we're going to be going treasure hunting Indiana Jones style and discussing the Palladium. The Palladium is said to be a divine statue that's been endowed with magical powers. And as the name kind of implies, the statue was thought to represent the goddess Pallas. Now, defining who the goddess Pallas was always gets a little bit confusing. For starters, there was also a titan named Pallas who had a daughter with Styx, who you might recognise from such waterways as the River Styx. There's also a Pallas or two who have a connection to Troy, and as if that wasn't enough, Virgil introduces us to another Pallas in the Aeneid. None of those are really relevant to what we'll be discussing today. So what is relevant? Well, the term Pallas is sometimes used as an epithet of the goddess Athena. What's an epithet? It's one of those very confusing, nonsense things to explain. Essentially, it's like a byname or a descriptive term that's used in place of a name. For example, the child is sometimes referred to Suk Suk. Well, actually, technically, it's not like that at all because it's not really a nickname, but it's something along those lines. But let's not get hung up on technicalities because all you really need to know for this video is that sometimes the goddess Athena is referred to as Pallas Athena. Let's just get back to the Palladium. Now, it was said that this statue had the power to protect whichever city possessed and worshipped it, just like it had done for 10 years in Troy, which is why that entire war took forever. As usual, when it comes to mystical objects, there are a few different stories regarding the origins of the Palladium. The first one that I'll share with you today includes another Pallas because we didn't have enough of them at the beginning of this video. When the goddess Athena was just a little girl, which was technically never considering she appeared like fully formed from Zeus or something. When the goddess Athena was just a little girl, she was brought up by the god Triton, who also had a little girl whose name was Pallas. Every day, Pallas and Athena would train together and practice their battle skills. However, one day, as is common with all young children, the two girls had a bit of an argument and Pallas went to whack Athena for realsies. Zeus, the father of Athena, was like, not my little girl, and he jumped between the two of them. Now, some might argue that he took things a little bit too far when he pulled out the Aegis, which is like his magic shield. The sight of the Aegis caused Pallas, who remember was just a little girl, to become so terrified that she didn't notice the sneak attack that Athena was about to pull, which meant that she didn't defend herself and ended up being mortally wounded. And she died. After all the drama settled, Athena actually did feel bad that she'd killed her friend because essentially Pallas had been like a sister to her. Turns out that heavenly gods and goddesses can have feelings. So to try and make up for it, Athena decided to carve a statue that looked like Pallas, and she even gave the statue a teensy-weensy little Aegis. When the statue was finished, she put it next to Zeus's giant chair up on Mount Olympus. This was supposed to be like a symbolic gesture and ode to the fact that Pallas was now also a goddess. This statue, and I'm sure you've worked this out by now, but this statue was the Palladium. And all went well for a while. The statue was enjoying its new home, sitting next to Zeus up in Mount Olympus, and everyone was happy. But one day, Zeus had a bit of a hissy fit because things weren't going particularly well between him and Electra. This particular Electra was the daughter of Atlas, not the Electra who is the daughter of Agamemnon. But anyway, Electra was like running away from Zeus and she ended up hiding behind the Palladium. I guess she thought the statue could protect her or something like that. But Zeus wasn't in the mood for this type of nonsense, so he took the statue and threw it away down from Mount Olympus. And the Palladium kind of bounced its way down from the heavens until it was spotted by this guy called Ilus. Now, Ilus had kind of been toying around with the idea about founding a city, but he hadn't 100% committed yet. There were a few tents scattered around the place, possibly a half-finished statue to Athena, depending on who you ask, but nothing had really been set in stone, so to speak. So when the Palladium, this magical statue, landed at his feet, he was like, clearly it's a sign from the heavens that I'm doing the right thing. And thus, Ilion was founded. Ilion is another name for Troy, and I'm sure that city needs no introduction. And the Palladium continued to play a central role in the history of Troy, especially because it was said that the statue had to be taken out of the city before it could be defeated. Which is why there's that whole Mission Impossible saga in the Iliad where Odysseus and Diomedes try and steal the Palladium. Does anyone else really not like Odysseus? Like, I just feel like he's a very unlikable human. I mean, there's even a whole version of the Palladium Troy stealing story where Diomedes does all the hard work, steals the statue, and then Odysseus wants to take it for himself so that he can go and bring it to the Greeks and claim all the credit. Actually, wait. I think in that version of the story, Diomedes actually screwed over Odysseus first by not helping him up the wall so that they could both enter Troy and steal the statue. I think. Alright, so that was a bad example, but I still don't like Odysseus. But moving on. Depending on which version of the story you're reading, either Odysseus or Diomedes do end up stealing the Palladium. And that is why the great, undefeatable city of Troy was defeated. Now, there are a few different theories or stories or claims regarding what actually ended up happening to the Palladium after it left the city. Some sources say that Agamemnon ended up keeping it, and in other versions Diomedes kept it. In the versions of the story where Diomedes is said to have kept it, it's said that he ended up taking the Palladium to southern Italy, where he eventually gave it to Aeneas, and that's how it ended up in Rome. But the Palladium is definitely one of those things that has a myriad of different myths and legends and stories associated to it. And I guess it's because the symbolic power of being able to claim a connection to the Palladium was a pretty useful thing to have. So for example, if you're following Virgil's series of events, Diomedes and Odysseus only managed to steal a fake Palladium. The real one was rescued by Aeneas. And it's in this version of the story that the Palladium ends up in the Temple of Vesta, where it's then worshipped by the Vestal Virgins. Or if you don't like that version, the Athenians also have a version of the story that proves the Palladium was in the city of Athens all along. The story goes a little something like this. After Diomedes managed to steal the Palladium, he gave it to this guy called Demophon. Demophon knew that Agamemnon really wanted the Palladium, so he sneakily gave it to this other dude who ended up smuggling it into Athens. And to keep Agamemnon from suspecting anything, Demophon had an exact replica of the Palladium made. And then when Agamemnon came to Demophon demanding that he hand over the Palladium, Demophon offered a bit of fake resistance just so Agamemnon wouldn't suspect anything. But eventually he let Agamemnon win and he was like, oh, fine, just take the damn statue. And that's why, even though Agamemnon thought he had the real statue, he actually had a fake. Now, just because we don't quite have enough stories regarding where the Palladium ended up, there's also another version of the story regarding how the Palladium was made. In this version of the story, it's said that the Palladium is actually made from the bone of Pelops' shoulder blade. If you're not familiar with Pelops, he's the dude who was cooked by his father and then served to the gods. In this origin story, the Palladium was actually stolen from Sparta along with Helen, the face that launched 1,000 ships. So in other words, Troy should never have even had the Palladium to start with, and they deserved what they got. Now, of course, there are many other stories regarding the Palladium floating around the great world. If I didn't mention one that you happen to know, please feel free to share it in the comments down below. But for now, thank you so much for watching this week's episode. I really hope you've enjoyed it and maybe would consider subscribing, because I look forward to sharing even more boring history with you in the future.